And welcome back to episode number 75. Boys, we're at 75 with 3/4 of our way to the big triple digits. But we're here for a full Patriots draft review. It's the three co-hosts as usual, Benny Ballgame, Zach Brewitt, myself, Matt Couture, and for our first three-time guest, we were talking to Lucy when she was coming on. I was like, Lucy, you've only been you're the second two-time guest. I was like, John's got you tied there, but now John's taking the lead back. WEEI's Jon Lyons, how you doing?
Yeah, great. It's a pleasure to be on, not only for the third time, but for the 75th episode as well. So just pleasure to join you guys once again and talk some Patriots draft.
Yeah, it's always good to have you on. Obviously, we just came back from a 3-day circus. I guess we can call the NFL draft these days. They make it into as much as a spectacle as they possibly can. Obviously, this year was in Green Bay, so we saw what we all kind of expected, and that's where I kind of want to lead us off here. Is the fourth pick came in, and I think despite all the rumors and potential movebacks and potential different picks, for the final week or two, it became evidently clear that it was going to be Will Campbell. And that's who it ended up being. So, John, I'll start with you. Where are you on this, number 4 pick, Will Campbell? Are you a fan of him in general? What are your thoughts on the pick there?
Yeah, so I said when they drafted him, and I maintain this now, Will Campbell is going to be a great NFL player. Obviously, the career-defining question, the franchise-altering question for the Patriots, is it a guard? Is it a tackle? They clearly drafted him, in my view, though, to be a tackle. Not only did Mike Vrabel say that, but you look at their later selection of Jared Wilson, and then, of course, you have Sidney So, Leighton Robinson, Cole Strange, all on this roster. It seems clear to me this is a pick to be the left tackle. Now, if his arms were 33 inches at the combine or over, I don't think there'd be any question about this, right? But it's that 32 and 5/8 inches at the combine, 33 at his pro day. So, I don't know if they grew any more between his plane ride to Foxborough or not. But I think, look, this is a really good football player. And I'm not brushing aside the arm length concern because I think it is something to monitor. Like Rashawn Slater, right at 33 inches, one of the best left tackles in the league with the Chargers. But generally, as we know, guys under that mark struggle to be great left tackles. But when you look at the whole package with Will Campbell, excellent hands to me. And that's something that gets really underrated with offensive linemen. But you watch him play on film, when he gets engaged with a defender, they usually don't get away. And that has a lot to do with his hands. I think he has great feet. He moves in space really well. This is a guy that allowed 4 sacks in 3 years total, going against not just SEC pass rushers. You go back to his very first game against Florida State. That was Jared Verse coming off the edge at him. Like, he's been going against great competition his entire career. So I'm not blowing the arm length concerns aside, but I think when you look at the whole package, this is a dude that's going to be a great football player. When I'm down in training camp, I'm obviously going to have my eye on, is it going to be a tackle? And frankly, guys, I think it can be a tackle.
Yeah, Ben, I know has been a little bit more confident than I have. Let me just set the record straight. I said from before the draft, I'm content with the pick. I like Will Campbell. It really came down to, for the number 4 pick, I have enough reservations and worries where for the number 4 pick, I didn't love it. And so I was willing to take a little bit less on the market value, like 70 cents, 75 cents on the dollar, to move back because of those reservations. That being said, in the end, they seem to be very confident that he's going to be a left tackle. He does have really good footwork. And I think the biggest thing that people don't really, I guess when you're talking to detail about his game, but his hand strength. And so the fact that he might have the short arms, but when he does get his hands on you, it's effective. So I think that makes up for it a little bit. So I'm pretty content here. Ben, I know you were a little bit, you were more thrilled. Ben, I watched the draft with Ben. He said if they were going to take John Walker at 4, which is who I love, that he was going to walk out of walk out of the house and not come back because he didn't want to listen.
Yes, that is a true statement. I said I would boo the pick and leave because I wasn't sure how crazy you would go. And but yeah, so John, to kind of reiterate your point, just based on the fact of he played in the SEC, 3-year starter at left tackle, but there, as we know, at least more in recent years, those non-conference SEC games tend to be, at least again more recently, against tougher competition. You noted the Florida State game from a couple years ago. So I look at it and go, he gave up 4 sacks in the SEC, also playing other top competition, bowl games, non-conference, and said, okay, if he's dominating against the top edge rushers that are also going to get drafted this year, and I get that, he won't have faced everybody that he wouldn't have faced everybody in the NFL that he would have faced in college, but he held his own in my view against the best competition in college football. And I think that while the arm length, yes, is a concern, certainly something that you can monitor, given his build, his athleticism, and the other, I guess, skill set he brings. Really good footwork, really good hands, John, as you had said. He doesn't really let anybody get past him. That I think those are things that make up for the fact that, he's not going to reach you as early as somebody else who's got, 35-inch arms. So certainly something to watch. I like the pick. I think he's incredibly athletic and certainly athletic enough. You said the Rashawn Slater competition comp. I think he does similar things that Will Campbell can do to overcome any concerns about his arm length. Rashawn Slater is a wildly athletic offensive lineman, which helps make up for that. I like the pick. It was the one thing Vrabel and had reiterated that he wanted to do in the offseason was build from the inside out, and left tackle really wasn't the only thing. It was like the only thing he didn't do. Matt and I and Zach too, we talked about potential left tackle free agents that never hit the market. Notably Ronnie Staley and Alaric Jackson, who were guys that were kind of on our target list. But, it was nice to see that they went out and they got a guy that I think can play left tackle at the NFL level. And certainly, helps bolster Drake May's blind side so that he can take that all important second year step forward in this offense.
Yeah. And I think it's a good point too. In another piece of this, and I might sound like a broken record when I say this, and because I've said it a few times before. If you look at the way LSU operated their offense the past couple of years, especially a couple of years ago with Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, they love to throw the ball down the field. And you're not going to do that if your left tackle can't hold up. And there were plenty of times where they left him isolated. They would slide protection to the right. They'd leave Will Campbell on his own, and they'd throw a 45-yard pass to Malik Neighbors. Like, you're not doing that if your guy's not good enough. So that might not be a true measurable, quote unquote, but I think it's something worth kind of mentioning as well. This is a guy that they truly trusted from the time he started at left tackle. I mean, they gave him the 7 patch after all, but a guy that they trusted as their guy basically from the time he started as their left tackle.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to hammer this point, but from the interviews that he gave pre and post draft, there was the infamous one pre-draft when he was like, yeah, nobody's talked about my arm length for 2 or 3 years. And now all of a sudden after the combine and my pro day, everyone wants to make it a big deal. He's like, I think the tape speaks for itself, and my play speaks volumes to my talent level. And I know that a lot of people
I was fine with that comment, but no one talked about it because he wasn't a draft prospect. Obviously, no one's really talking about it.
Fair. No, but arm length is important, but it isn't the major point. I mean, Kay Adams had it on, I think it was yesterday or today. She pulled up a graphic of all these different left tackles and linemen with similar, if not shorter arms than Will Campbell, Joe Thomas being one of them. There's a few other ones that were stars and studs within that group. And it's to Will Campbell's point, no one questioned it when he was playing, and he was playing in John, to your point, the SEC, Jared Verse, Abdul Carter, all these guys who have gone on and done it in the NFL and been first-round picks, been studs in college football, and also as I mentioned, NFL. It isn't like he's coming from UC Chattanooga or one of these like, D2, D3 schools.
Sounds like a subtle shot right there.
Subtle shot at Bill Belichick, as I tend to do. But it isn't like he's coming from nowhere and you're hoping and praying he can do it. He's proven it at the college level, and now he's getting a chance, obviously, in the NFL to do it. I, like you, Matt, I was less enthused about a lineman at number 4. Obviously, you want the sexy pick, you want a wide receiver, skill position player. But it's kind of like, I think it was Bedard who said this, it's kind of like getting socks for Christmas or your birthday. Like, it's not a sexy pick. You're not going to go out and play with your boys with it. But it's something you need, something that's absolutely going to be beneficial throughout the course of this team. And obviously a guy we talked about before in Will Campbell that Mike Vrabel certainly values his tenacity, his mauler and brawler, mentality when it comes to like playing the position. So surprised, no. Excited, but definitely think is going to be, a left tackle for sure, and a pretty damn good one at that, given the fact that he's done it, as I mentioned, in the SEC and I think to the college ranks.
Yeah, and the other thing that I really like too is where I was going with the post draft interviews is you can tell that he has that leadership mentality that like he's gonna run the O-line room. You heard it, and I know that everyone kind of hammered him for the emotion and the crying when he got his name called, but like for a guy like that, he's a guy you can tell just he loves to play football. He appreciates the fact that his talents are recognized, and love the comment about like he's like, yeah, like I'm gonna fight and die for my guys and do my best, and he feels like he fits the mold of Mike Vrabel being like, I want to change the culture. I want the right guys with the right attitude and the right mentality here. And so, he definitely has that leader mentality, and you certainly like that as from the guy that's protecting what'll probably be a $50 million quarterback in 3 years.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is, and John kind of pointed out it in his original conversation, is like the reason I'm more content about it is I think he's kind of bust proof in the sense that I think his floor is like a good guard. So, if we sit here and talk about like, is a good guard worth the fourth pick? No. But even if he does fail at left tackle, I think he can move inside and be a really good guard. And if he's a really good guard, we're not going to call the pick a win, but we're not going to call it some like horrible miss either.
No.
So that's kind of that is, and it was similar into when you evaluate prospects. And I think this is where fans and people that just kind of don't really understand it that much. It's you got to project a ceiling in a player, but then you have to project how likely it is that player hits that ceiling. So when you're talking about like second and third round picks, a lot of these second and third round picks, you're seeing like some real talent, but they're second and third round picks because teams view the likelihood that they hit that peak as not as likely as the first round picks. And so when you talk about Will Campbell, obviously his peak is, I think he could be a very good left tackle. But then the same thing with the floor, the worst case scenario, he's a guard. And I think a really good guard. I don't see a scenario really where he's like an all-around bum. Like he just busts out at both positions. So, I mean, I'm pretty happy with it. It seems like you guys are kind of happy with it. Do you guys like, John, was Will Campbell your number one option there, or were you hoping, if not, let's put the trade back out of the question. Was there anyone that you preferred over Will Campbell?
Yeah, so for me, my first choice to, I know you just said it, but would have probably been to trade back if they could have got a good offer. But yeah, when it came to the pick itself, he was, because the last time you got good left tackle play was 2018. Like on a consistent week-to-week basis, the last time your left tackle play was good, we're talking 7 years ago. And when the Patriots were good, right? Okay, they had Brady, they had Bill, they had all these. They always had stable, consistent left tackle play. There were certain things those teams always had. They always had a good corner. They always had stable, consistent left tackle play. And even look around the league right now. Like, it's not a coincidence that the Eagles and the Lions have the two best offensive lines in the NFL. They were the two best teams in the NFC last year. one of them won the Super Bowl. So I was a supporter of it. And I think it's also a case of, and I'm not saying you guys specifically, but everybody wants to fix the offensive line until it's actually time to invest resources and fix the offensive line. And then they want the running back, the receiver, the corner, whatever. And it's like, no, you got, I mean, Matt Light was a second-round pick. Nate Solder was a first-round pick. Trent Brown was a guy that they targeted at the very least in a free agency trade arena. And Isaiah Wynn was a bust, but that was a guy they also targeted in the first round. So you have to target these guys high. It's just extremely hard to find a good left tackle, and I would even say a good right tackle after the first round. It's just really difficult to find. So I was again, I'm not brushing aside the arm length concerns, but if you look at the total package, I was a supporter of it.
Yeah. And one thing that, I mean, it's all in hindsight. I was a little frustrated because I was a Jelon Walker preacher. I absolutely loved him. The Falcons got just beyond a steal at that value, but it was mildly frustrating to see a guy like Josh Connerly fall into the Commander's lap at 29, knowing that the Pats could have theoretically moved up pretty easily for him at that point. Nevertheless, they didn't move up at all. They sat there at the 38th pick. A lot of talk from Greg Bedard and I think a couple others that they had their eye on, was it Arizona's guard? Jonah.
Savanea.
Savanea. There we go. I just call him Sav. I don't know how to pronounce it properly. Ultimately, he was selected by Miami. Elliot Wolf made comments in the post-draft presser insinuating that they were between two guys and that were, some of the front office wanted one guy, some wanted the other guy. It seems like it was these two options. And obviously, so Savanea, whatever it is, he goes to Miami. And Travion
Henderson. Yeah.
I know it's not Trayvon. Travion Henderson ends up getting drafted at 38. Obviously, the running back position is a little bit of a polarizing topic. John, where were you on this pick? Do you like Henderson, the player? How are your thoughts on going running back this early altogether?
Yeah, I think this is a case of like two things can be true because right there on the board, I was hoping for Donovan Ezaraku at the edge. I mean, I just love that player, not just the BC connection. I just think he's a terrific player and would have been a great fit for the Patriots. So I didn't love a running back at 38. Okay, so but also I think Travion Henderson is a really good football player. And what he adds to the Patriots backfield is something they have not had in a very long time. And that's long speed. Like he runs away from people. I mean, you look at that touchdown against Texas in the semifinal, a 75-yard screen pass. Those are Texas defensive backs he's running away from and gaining ground away from. Like, that's impressive. And last year, he only had 26 catches, which in itself is not a big number, but 281 yards. So we're talking over 10 yards per catch. He can run a ton of routes. He gets open. He's really good in space. Now, I don't think he's going to be your, hey, run in the A and B gap consistently type runner. I'm not saying he can't do it at all, but that's not going to be his main game. He's going to be in space, swing passes, screen passes, outside runs. And another piece of this, which I think is extremely important, he might be the best pass blocking running back in the entire draft. You look at the way he squares up on guys, the way he uses his hands, stays balanced. He does a really great job with that. And why is that important? One, for the obvious, because you want to be good at it. But B, it allows Josh McDaniels to put him on the field in any situation, right? It's not going to be a case of, when Damian Harris is on the field, they run it 70% of the times. And when Sony Michel's on the field, they run it 70% of the time. It allows him to be on the field on all three downs. And he's going to be part of a group with Stevenson, with Gibson. But again, he adds an element to that backfield that I can't think of the last time they had a guy with, Pierre Strong had good long speed, but he could never fully get on the field. I can't think of a time they've had a guy who can consistently get on the field in the backfield that has great long speed and is a great pass protector. So again, I was kind of hoping edge there, but I love the player and the skill set.
I don't know who that last guy would be that had the legitimate home run speed.
Maybe Danny Woodhead had elements of that. But it's for that true long speed.
Would Ridley have had that?
Ridley had it. I think Ridley did.
Ridley was more of a pounder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know that he's kind of a poor man's version of a Travion Henderson. The guy that I heard that was really comped because of his ability to pass block was Shane Vereen. He wasn't like a burner, but he's probably the closest thing you've had to the skill set of a Travion Henderson, because Vereen could catch the ball to the backfield. He had decent speed. He wasn't running away from guys the way that Travion can, but like he's probably the closest thing you've had to what Travion Henderson is going to bring to the table.
Honestly, when I watch Henderson, I get shades of CMC. And I think that's a little bit obvious. I'm not saying he's going to be Christian McCaffrey. I mean, I think he's in a league of his own in terms of just talent at that position. But his ability, the way he moves out of the backfield, the way he can catch a ball, in like any time he catches it, you could see it going for 70 yards downfield. He just gives me a little bit shades there. I know he's gone some comps. I've heard of Gibbs a little bit, stuff like that. Overall, though, John, you kind of said it and hit it on the head where he's a very well-rounded back, and I think that's very important here. If you're going to use an early pick on a running back, he needs to be able to be on the field all 3 or 4 downs of a drive. You can't use a 38th pick on a third down back or a thumper that can't catch out of the backfield and can't block in pass protection. And then he's no matter how good he could be at one part of the game, he's sitting there on the sidelines because he can't excel at the other part of the games. So you kind of hit it. He's a home run hitter type of guy, and he can do it all in terms of pass blocking, catching out of the backfield. So he can be a guy that really stays on the field. I mean, I think the goal would be to have him on the field 75-80% of snaps. And that's, I don't think it's something that's going to happen right away, especially if Stevenson's still around. But I don't really see a reason why he can't come in week 1 and have at least half the snaps of in the game.
Ben brought up, I thought, a good comparison in Shane Vereen. And that was probably the one guy I thought of when I was really looking at him, in that Shane Vereen could run pretty much any route you wanted. Like, I mean, he didn't have the true breakaway speed that Henderson has, but like, I remember there was, Super Bowl 49, right? The end of that game, he was running every route you could ask for. There was a game, I think it was 2013 against the Browns, like Gronk got hurt and they were running Vereen on seam routes. Like, it was like he could do all these different things. So that, I think that is a good, not exactly the same guy, but I think it's similar player, just with better long speed, if you will.
Yeah, and he's a little undersized. Going back to Travion Henderson, like Elliot Wolf made this comment in I don't know if it was the post-draft press conference. It could have been after the second and third round were over, maybe pre-day 3 guys, said that while Henderson might be undersized for that position, which I don't know if he's truly undersized. He's 5'10", like 205. Which again, like, it's the right height. Maybe he doesn't have the extra 10 pounds of some of these bruiser backs, but they view him as a 3-down back. He said that they think he could be a 3-down guy. But I love the skill set. In the moment, I thought it kind of felt a little high of a draft pick. And it probably would have been too high for a wide receiver. Matt and I really, really fell in love with Trey Harris out of Ole Miss. That was probably too high for him. But given what they want to use out of their running backs, I can't necessarily say I'm surprised because he just kind of fits what they want to do. I think, like, now that I've kind of processed through, the draft was, he was picked last Friday. I think about it and go, like, am I feeling weird just because I'm not used to the Patriots taking a running back with a 38th overall pick? Like, that's just not something we've done in 20 years. We're used to these, second round picks being your Jawan Williams, your Razai Dowlings, your Duke Dawsons, your Cyrus Jones kind of guys that are like,
stop giving us PTSD.
I liked Razai Dowling at the time too. He started week 1 of his rookie year and then got hurt and he became a ghost.
He did. But like, we're just
nice little what if. Yeah,
we're so used to these, like,
a lot of those.
Yeah. And I guess the worst one would be like Jordan Richards. We're used to being like, wait, we took who at 45? So
speaking of PTSD,
I think maybe that was part of it for me, where I'm like, yeah, I like a running back, but I was like, wait, we're taking a running back at 38? Like, I was just shocked because I think we're not used to it. But I love the player, love the skill set, and maybe come training camp, we're going to be dreaming of screen passes and 60-yard gains by Travion Henderson, hopefully come week 1.
Yeah, it certainly was high, but John, as you said, it allows Josh to keep him in at any down. So you're not a great point with Sony Michel. You're not telling the defense what you're playing, what you're calling, because he had to follow James Devlin behind the fullback, and that was pretty obvious that every time he's on the field, he's going to be running. So gives that second ability or second thought to defensive coordinators when he's on the field, he could do a screenplay, he could be running behind the tackles, whatever the case. So certainly didn't love it, but watching film, thinking about it a bit more, warming up to the idea of Travion Henderson, and that obviously opens up the door to what could potentially happen with Ramondre Stevenson, Antonio Gibson as well. There could be some redundancies with that in the running back room. So we'll have to see what happens there. But again, as I watch more film and hear more about it, certainly get more and more excited about the pick.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I think it's kind of a wait and see type of situation. When you take a running back early, you kind of bet a hit on him, and if you don't, it ends up looking even worse than if you took a cornerback and missed on that. So we'll see where he fits in. There were guys like you said. I liked the BC edge. There was another. Nick Scorton was still available, I think. Yeah, he went after. Those were my top 2 options at 38. I look at the Henderson pick and I gave it like a B in my grades because I felt like it caught me out of surprise, but he's a really good player. And ultimately, you want really good players. I'm always the best available guy. So if that's who they had, that's who they had. So obviously later in round 3, Ben was blowing up my phone about moving up. Move up for this guy, move up for that guy. I wanted Trey Harris very badly. He went to LA, the Chargers in like the 50s.
53,
I wanted to
53,
yeah,
50.
I think it was 55.
55.
Yeah. That was the range where I felt like it was reasonable, where they could have gotten up there, maybe give up like 106 or a future 4th or something like that. I would have done that for a guy like Trey Harris, but I'm a little bit higher on him than usual. But Kyle Williams comes in at pick 69.
Yep.
Yeah, they didn't move up. Guy from Washington State. He was my wide receiver 7, I believe, overall, and I think he was probably drafted about that. I'm not sure exactly what number wide receiver 8.
He was the 8th wide receiver drafted.
So yeah, so I think that's pretty good value. I thought that he was going to go in the 50s. I thought he was a guy that really rose up boards. I remember on PFF doing mocks, he was like mocking in the 5th round. I'm like, they need to make adjustments because he's not going to go in the 5th round anymore. Ultimately, I think they made a really good pick here. What were your thoughts, Zach? We could start with you. What were your thoughts on Kyle Williams in that selection overall? I know you wanted to mock him in our last one.
I like Kyle Williams a lot. I actually, when I heard her, it was like whoever the woman was who announced the pick. I didn't know what she said at first. And I went to go like some water, and I came back, and they were doing highlights of. I was out. Oh shit, it's nice. But there was a caller who called in to Felger and Maz, I think it was yesterday, who said the first 3 picks essentially equate to Joe Tooney. This was all negative, by the way. Joe Tooney, James White, and Deshaun Jackson, to which if those are what equates to your 3 picks, you're getting a Hall of Famer, a Hall of Fame guard, hopefully tackle, a Patriots Hall of Famer in James White, and then Deshaun Jackson was a fantastic wide receiver. And watching tape on him, I do see a lot of comparisons, between the 2, Kyle Williams and Deshaun. Just the breakaway speed. It's been circulating around Twitter forever, but there's a quick slant after he goes in motion that he catches and just goes a distance like 75 yards or whatever it is, which pairs up. I can't remember if it was Matt Groh or Elliot Wolf who said that they wanted to add speed to the offense when they picked Tyquan Thornton. It does a little bit of both.
Must have been Matt Groh.
Yeah, you want to get fast, draft fast guys. That's what he said. Yeah.
Well, they did that. The only issue was with Tyquan Thornton is that he couldn't play the position.
See,
Kyle
the
Williams
only thing you
certainly
could do
can.
is run straight.
Just run straight. This track star who can't make cuts. Kyle Williams is a great pick. I loved it. Like it even more now that I'm watching it. Brian Baldinger had a great breakdown on Twitter as well of just kind of what he brings to the table. And it's what we don't have currently. Like we have a lot of undersized guys even before Stephon Diggs. A lot of route runners who can create separation, but not that game-breaking speed we talked about with Trevion Henderson. Kyle Williams brings more of a home run hitter type mentality and sort of wrinkle to the offense that I think McDaniels will certainly take advantage of and give Drake May that deep threat that Booty was trying to become and was kind of a pseudo deep threat just because we had nobody else. So certainly excited to see what he can do, with an actual deep threat.
Yeah. John, where are you at on him?
Yeah, well, first of all, Zach, you're listening to the wrong station. I mean, callers to Fel, come on, man. Yeah, I'm just kidding. But look,
hey, listen, it wasn't a good call, so I'm switching over to WEI for sure.
So when it comes to Kyle Williams, you bring up a good point, Zach, in that he has the deep, long speed that really doesn't exist in their wide receiver room right now. I actually found this, I think it's their riskiest pick. And I say that because they could have drafted Jaden Higgins at 38. They could have traded up for Trey Harris in late in the second round, 54, 55. Isaac Tesla went with the very next pick right after them, a guy who hasn't dropped a pass at all in his last year in college. So this is a guy they clearly targeted. Like they like Kyle Williams. It wasn't, the board fell this way, whatever. Like they had other opportunities to get other guys and they wanted him. And there is a lot to like. I think his releases at the line, I'm not going to sit here and call him Devontae Adams, but he's probably the best guy in the draft as far as releases at the line go. And that's huge for separation. The long speed, Zach, you hit the nail on the head. That's something this offense just doesn't really have. Because even Kayshon Boutte, like I know he caught a couple deep touchdowns. To me, that was more about Drake May making a couple incredible throws against Houston and Buffalo. I mean, it wasn't like Boutte had burned some guys and had huge separation. So I think Kyle Williams is great in those two areas. My only concerns, he had 70 catches last year, but I think he had over 100, maybe 110 targets. So they not a huge completion percentage to him. There's some drop issues here and there. I also wonder, how is he going to operate in the short to intermediate range? Because we know Josh McDaniels' offense. They love the short to intermediate range routes. Now, Randy Moss had 23 touchdowns in this offense. Chris Hogan led the NFL in yards per reception in 2016 in this offense. So they will push it down the field, especially with May. But I think if you're going to be successful in this offense as a receiver, you have to be able to run some stuff in the short area too. And Zach, you mentioned the slant pass that he took deep as well. Like I want to see more of that. Like that's something I'm going to be watching in training camp. How does he do in the short to intermediate area? How is he as a blocker? Because so much of the stuff at Washington State was, hey, get these guys open in space and let them run. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but just there's some little things I want to see. So that's why I think there's a lot to like here. But I think due to the fact that they targeted him and there's a couple things I'd like to see clean up, little bit of risk involved here. But frankly, I mean, with their record of drafting receivers, I think you can only go up. So
I was just going to say, it's always a bit of a risk when the Patriots pick a wide receiver.
Yeah.
But I hear you for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he was the most coveted guy at that point with their pick. I think most fans wanted him. In terms of the short-term routes, the reason I have optimism is, like you said, his release package at the line of scrimmage is really impressive.
It's terrific. Yeah.
And so if you have a good release package, generally that creates very early separation. So that should give him that edge to be able to be that immediate kind of playmaker. But like you said, I know he does have some drop issues. That being like, deep ball guys always drop a few here and there. Like that's part of the game when you're going deep. In terms of just, they haven't had this in a very long time. Kayshon Boutte gets a lot of love. The reality is with Kayshon Boutte is he's a very average player.
He might not make the team this year. I mean,
I'm not
trying to call him out, but you just look at the way that receiver room shakes out. he might not.
Yeah.
Make
He,
the team.
he's a projected cut. The Athletic put out an article
Yeah.
Monday or Tuesday. He was a
The
projected.
thing,
Well, they
don't think
didn't
he'll
do
get
cuts.
cut
He was
just-
projected not to make the roster.
yeah, I don't think he'll get cut just because in the sense of I think a team will give them a late round pick at least
maybe.
before they
Yeah.
before that. But I look at him and I say, you know, he's not overly fast. He's not overly big. He's not a guy that's gonna like go out and outleap you. He's a decent wide receiver that was not screwing up. I would say just screwing up the least last year. So he got the most playing time. And when you have a guy like Drake May that can drop it in a bucket down deep, it resulted in a few really impressive, memorable plays that in a season of misery, fans kind of clamped onto as a sign of hope. But the reality is, I think that Booty is decent. Maybe he has a chance to be like a wide receiver 3 for a team. But right away, Kyle Williams next to Diggs instantly becomes talent-wise your first or second best player in the receiving room. It's just whether, like you said, John, like he can put it together on all the other aspects of the position.
The size thing too, I think. It's sorry to cut you off, but that's I should have mentioned that before. Like he's 5'10 and a half, 5'11, 186. Like X receivers generally are that Trey Harris size, like 6'2, 205 or 6'3, 210. So I mean, they can play him at X. He's probably long-term more a Z, which is where you have Stephon Diggs. So it's going to be interesting to just see how they fit all these pieces together, kind of to your point.
Yeah. And I don't think necessarily that they're done adding to the team and maybe even the receiving core too. I mean, we saw last year, like when was the Ayuk talks? This was in like August, right?
Yeah, early August.
Yeah. You know, we're now in the post-draft. I would say call it like section 3 of the last of third tiers of the offseason where you're in the post-draft. Teams are now reevaluating their rosters. They've just brought in a bunch of rookies. So there's going to be positions around teams where they say, well, you know, we just drafted our second and fourth round wide receiver. Maybe this guy's a little bit more expendable now. I wouldn't rule out that they add another receiver to the mix. I know that Kyle Williams has gotten a lot of like, he's going to be the X guy there. But like you just said, I don't know how much I buy that. I don't really view him necessarily as like, he's not a true X. I don't see. I think you're right where you see him more in the Z role, similar to Diggs in a way of what he had played. Diggs is a little bit more of an X, I feel, type of player than Kyle Williams, but a guy that can just do a little bit of everything. You're going to move him around the offense, design plays around him, get him in space, and let him take the ball to the house. So, I mean, I'm excited about it. Ben, I know you haven't really got a chance to chime in here. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have hammered a lot of good points. Couple just stat things I'll throw out there. You know, I think the speed that he brings certainly, I think, can, against some corners, help out with the size situation. You know, John, I think you measured at the combine, he was 5'11", 190 that day. And that may have been a round up because I guess at the draft they listed him at like 5'10" and 5'8" or something. But he ran a 4.40, which is pretty good speed. Couple things I found on his Pro Football Focus from last year. So you mentioned the drops. He had a 6.7% drop rate. The raw number is 5. He had 5. I don't know how 5 drops on 106 targets equates to a 6.7% drop rate. They must just be accounting for, you know, off-target throws that were deemed uncatchable. The things that I do get excited for, and I think might be able to translate if they use them correctly, which we hope they do. He was top 20 in the country in both yards after catch per reception and missed tackles forced, which I think are, you know, for a guy like him, he's super shifty with the ball in his hands. You know, I don't think he can be this guy, but the way he runs and moves, and again, he doesn't have this kind of speed. He runs to me kind of like Tyreek Hill. he can shift and move around guys, and he's got enough breakaway speed that he can run away from guys. He's not going to hit 22 miles an hour. He doesn't have sub 4.3 speed like Tyreek Hill. I just see a little bit of that in his game, with the elusiveness and being shifty. And so, hopefully, the speed can certainly help. He had a pretty solid contested catch rate. He caught 62.5% of his contested catches last year, which is odd for a guy with some drop concerns. So definitely some risk.
He makes the hard ones and drops the easy ones.
Well, I think too, Ben, you bring up a great point. Like top 20 in yards per catch, separation after catch per catch. That tells me he's running away from guys, which is another good, much like we said about Travion Henderson, right? He's running away from guys. That's a valuable thing to have in that receiver room.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's circulated across X. I'm sure we've all seen it, but there's a video, and they played it over and over and over again after he was drafted. There's a video of when they played Colorado last year where he just runs by Travis Hunter. And, I get that, we can talk till we're blue in the face about what is Travis Hunter's best position. Is he elite at one or both or neither? But I mean, he was generally rated the number one prospect in the draft across the board from everybody. So to watch him I think they were like red zone plus. I think they're on like the 25 or 30 yard line to, in that short of a field, just run by arguably the best player in the draft was kind of like, wow. Travis Hunter is not slow. He's bigger. And and Travis Hunter is, I think he's faster. I know he didn't run at the combine, but he's not slow by any stretch of the imagination. If he gets matched up against somebody who's maybe equally as, equal build, size, and height and weight, I think he's going to win most of those battles against those other corners.
Yeah, I mean, he has that. And we talked about this with Henderson and what the wide receiver room lacks. Is he just has something to his game that no one else in that room really has. And even the younger guys, like we talked about what we see we could go on about Polk and all that, but even Baker doesn't have that. Bourne doesn't have that. Booty doesn't have it. Diggs, I don't think that's really even Diggs' game necessarily. Kyle Williams, and we talked about this with Henderson, they both add elements to this offense of legitimate raw talent that the room doesn't have. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be great. He could, knowing the Patriots, he's going to come in and suck. That's just the confidence that we kind of expect right now with the wide receiver room. But he's got that speed. He's got that playmaking ability that they desperately needed in the room. So moving on to round 4, they brought in Georgia center Jared Wilson. If he's anything like the last Georgia center for the Patriots, I think we'd be pretty happy. There's talk that Wolf mentioned maybe he could also play a little bit of left guard. We'll start with you, Ben, to give you the floor. What are your thoughts on this pick? Was this someone that you liked over him? I know that we discussed a little bit of the idea of going other directions at that pick. But are you happy, content? Where are you on this?
So I'll kind of come at this from two different angles. So I had thought going into the draft, I was expecting interior offensive line help. They went out and they signed Bradbury. So in my head, I go, okay, there's no immediate need for center. There will be long-term. Bradbury's good, but I think he gave up the most sacks of any center last year in football. So there's maybe some protection concerns. I'm not entirely sure, but I figured, okay, he's 29-ish. So I figured, there's, maybe they go somebody, late. I looked at a guy like Jake Majors out of Texas as possible late round center that they might target. So, in the 4th round, it's kind of tricky. There wasn't really anybody like in the moment. I suppose, I could always pull it up and see like who was kind of around there. No, I'm sorry, not the 4th round. They got him in the
end of the 3rd, but
end of the 3rd.
It was almost, it was like the very, very end of the 3rd.
Yeah, because they traded back from 77 twice.
Yeah, to 85 and then 85 to 95 and go.
Yep. And
which was the Judon pick. So they turned this Judon pick into
Yeah, it's the
Was- I
new
think it
Jimmy
was
G pick
Swins-
where there's going to be a spider web of other
It
picks.
ended up being Wilson, Swinson in a fourth next year. Chicago's fourth next year.
Yeah. So I mean, at that spot, I mean, right after him, you like Xavier Watts. There's a couple other offensive linemen. Most notably, I guess, is in terms of name, like Charles Grant was the 99th overall pick. Considering he was the top center in the draft, I don't hate the pick. It's in the same category as Will Campbell. It's not a sexy pick because it's like, yeah, we got a center, but center is obviously it's very important. He's the field general, if you will, of the offensive lineman. He's up there setting protections and picking guys out. So if you can bring a guy like that in, that's only going to be better for the offensive line room. The skill set, love the skill set. Again, top rated center in the draft. I figured they would do it. I didn't know when they would take a guy like Wilson, but considering you got the top center in the draft with a late third round pick, with some versatility, he could play guard. Certainly brings versatility, stability, and a guy that you would expect to slot in, whenever Bradbury is no longer a New England Patriot. I mean, looking around, there really wasn't anybody else, given what they had already drafted, that I was like, oh yeah, like, we could have had, it's not like we're sitting here being like, oh, they could have had Upton Stout, who the 49ers took at 100. Like Matt and I both kind of were like, oh, like he's kind of an interesting, gadgety kind of guy, but there's nobody that was really in between picks 95 and 106 that I felt like, oh, well, we picked Wilson over that guy. So I like the pick, it's, you're helping out your potential franchise quarterback with a young center, who again is used to playing against top defensive line in the country. So I mean, again, not a sexy pick, but I'm happy that we got a top player at a position that, again, maybe not be a need now, but would have been a need probably a year or a year and a half from now.
Yeah, I'll say I like the pick now. During the draft, when they traded down, I was getting shades. I was getting flashbacks of Bill trading down and just getting a guy that would say yes to him and that he liked and his scouts didn't like. But that being said, as you said, Ben, like getting the number one center in the draft is certainly a plus. When you have question marks at center, they have bodies at center, but no one's really standing out as the true, like, clear-cut number one starting center on the team. Everything about him, screams athletic, something that is certainly going to help. And obviously, if he becomes, Matt, the next Georgia center star from the Patriots, that's never a bad thing. But Ben, to your point of like who was on the board at 75, 77, and then 85, whatever. So like Kevin Winston was the guy that I was looking at. If this is obviously before Craig Woodson was drafted. He was a guy that I was looking at that pick. Jalen Noel was on the board, but they had just taken Kyle Williams, so he was a long shot to pick him. And then after they traded back, Wyatt Millum was also on the board with the pick that they traded to Kansas City. But again, overall, looking back, good pick, good value for that pick, especially the number one center. But in the moment, I was like, here we go again, more trade backs, more acquiring assets for down the line. But ended up working out this time for sure.
Yeah, the only other guy that I kind of fell in love with him as, like, we're playing around with mock drafts. So the guy that went 77th overall is the guy that I really liked was Princely Uman-Milan. I hope I'm saying that correctly. The edge rusher out of Ole Miss. They could have stayed and picked him or, gotten somebody else. I almost wonder, and I guess, John, I'll ask you just if you have any insight on this. Do you think that if a guy like Kevin Winston had fallen to 85 where they were picking, do you think they still trade back with Kevin Winston still on the board, especially knowing now that they went with Woodson at 106? Like, do you think that what are the odds if Winston was still sitting there at 85 that the Pats stay at 85 and take him versus trade back again?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like, for me, the safety I wanted was Andrew Makuba out of Texas. Shout out to the Eagles for getting him as well. Like, I think if he had been there at 77, they would have just taken him right there. So it's a great question because, like, Kevin Winston played 2 games last year before he got hurt. So there are some legit injury questions, him coming back. So it's a good question. I think they might have, but I think either way, if they had taken him, say, there, then at 106, you would have seen a center or a guard. Like, I think they were going to go interior offensive line with one of those two picks regardless. And I mean, I like this Jared Wilson pick a lot. It might be my favorite pick they made in the draft. And part of that's because I'm a weirdo that likes watching offensive line play. But also, I mean, you look at it, they haven't had good depth at center since Ted Karras left in free agency to go to Cincinnati. What was that, 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
Yep.
This guy's 6'3", 310, and he ran a 4.8 at the combine, which always feels good that a 310-pound man runs faster than me. But this is a really athletic guy. And I think he can play guard. He can play center. He's a second-team All-SEC guy last year in his first year starting. I mean, he didn't start playing football till high school. So I think this is a really great athlete. Probably needs a year to develop because limited playing time. But I look at the future. I mean, if your offensive line in 2026 says Onwenu at right guard, this guy at center, and then Campbell at left tackle, like, you got 3 solid building blocks there moving forward, at least for that season and potentially moving forward. So I think this is a great athlete. I think he needs a year to develop. We'll see how Bradbury does. I'm a little iffy on Bradbury just in that the Vikings could be a Super Bowl contender and they were perfectly okay to let him walk. So I'm a little iffy on him, but I think if Wilson has a year to develop, we're going to be talking about a guy that's a center for them and potentially a guard for quite a while.
Yeah, and that's,
I think
that's why I like him to sit behind Bradbury too.
At least for half a season, but probably for a full season.
Yeah. I think it was overall a solid pick. I mean, looking at how the draft played out, I remember at 77, I was banging the drum for either Wyatt Millam or
it's another player I like a
Winston.
lot too, by the way.
Yeah, Winston Jr. I thought Wyatt Millam next to Campbell would be just flat out dangerous, long term. I love both of them just as like play style, like that mauling, aggressive. Millam was a dominant left tackle at West Virginia this year. His arm length is like 32 and a half, so he's probably going to be a guard. When they moved back, I know, Ben, you talked about like Kevin Winston Jr. and another guy that got taken right before was Jacob Parrish, the cornerback. I know both of us liked him from Kansas State. He came in on a visit, so I know there was probably certainly some interest there, so maybe that played another factor into them moving back. Ultimately, they did move back. Noel Williams went with that pick. And then, like you said, we said they slid back to, where was it, 95 here. Again, I look at this and I was like, was it my preferred pick? No. I know we talked about, I was a Kyle Kennard guy here. There was Jack Sawyer talk here. There was one other edge rusher off the top of my head that was in this range as well. But, when you look back at it, I think that Jared Wilson is a solid pick. Like you said, he's pretty big. He's uber athletic for his size. And even if he doesn't start like week 1, that's not a big deal. Ben knows I scream best available player. And as long as the player ends up good, that will help a football team win. So he wasn't my preferred pick, but I'm content with it. I think he's a pretty good overall talent. I think he was the best pure center in the league in the draft class. Excuse me. You could debate like if Zabal or who's the other guard that went in the early second.
Donovan Jackson. No, he was late first.
There was someone else that went in. There was
Early.
Someone else that went in. I think anyways, interior line. That might play center, might end up at center for those teams. But no, Jared Wilson was I think the best pure center coming into the league, into the draft. So, I mean, you look at the top 4 picks and you say you got a very talented wide receiver. You got probably the consensus RB3 in the draft, and he was the 3rd running back taken. You got the consensus or majority top left tackle, and then you add arguably the best pure center in the class. So I think you got to be happy with that. Obviously, going after that, I think it was round 5. They picked up 2 guys. Obviously, they got Craig Woodson with the safety. He's got some good versatility. Was he in? That's 4?
106.
They got him in the 4th round at 106.
Oh, okay. There's just so many comp picks that it confuses me.
I know
exactly
some of these rounds. It feels like some of these rounds have 40 picks with all the comp pick. I know
they really do, especially like the 6th round stuff like that. But anyway, so the next 2 picks they went and got. They doubled down on defense. They went and got Craig Woodson, the safety, good versatility, played deep, played a little bit in the box, played some slot. And then a guy that like Ben was banging down the door for at 106, and maybe at 95, he might have been too. Is it Braden?
Braden Swinson.
Yeah, Braden. Swinson.
I wanted them to trade up for Jack Sawyer. I was a big Jack Sawyer fan, but I mean, I liked Swinson.
Yeah, I mean, he comes in at, I think he had 12.5 sacks last year. One of the higher pass rush win rates last year. He's a 1-year starter, similar to Jared Wilson. So he's still probably a little bit raw, but to get him at that late, I think was a really good value. He made some comments about Will Campbell, I think today or yesterday on social media. He was like, if you just listen to him talk, he's going to be a 10-year vet. And, that's a little bit encouraging. They're going to get to go up against one another like they just did for the last 2 years, basically, in college. So where are your thoughts, guys, on those two picks, doubling down on defense? Like them, hate them. Where are you guys there?
Love the Braden Swinson pick. I'd be lying if I said I knew anything about Craig Woodson. Vrabel seemed, hyped when he got him. And there was a clip that came out, right as they picked him. But yeah, the Braden Swinson pick is one that it felt like he kind of fell to them. If everyone kind of said that he would be a day 2 guy, certainly not a 4th round, 5th round, whatever we got him in. SEC, as you mentioned, all the kind of intangibles or all the talking points already, Matt. But he was a guy that I was super excited about. But again, not going to sit here and act like I know anything about Craig Woodson, except for the fact that, safety, position of need, certainly plays more of that center field. We talked about them not really having that free safety, that true free safety on the roster, despite having seemingly a plethora of safeties.
I'll take Rob Cusack. I forgot Farmer went before Swinson, so we can jump him into here. I thought it was vice versa.
The Farmer, too, is a good pick. I know more about him than I know about Craig Woodson. So I'll throw him in the mix as well. Liked it. They seem to be getting, these seem to be like the best picks in terms of, value, who was available, guys who fell to them that probably shouldn't have, Farmer and Swinson specifically. So overall, felt really good about these 3 picks, and the day 3 in general just felt maybe one of their best. Obviously, only 1 pick in day 1, but pumped to see it.
Yeah, the things I liked about, I guess I'll touch on Woodson, and this goes back to the, Vrabel wanting good guys in the locker room. He was a captain at Cal, which certainly speaks to his leadership abilities, which you want in a guy who is going to basically be the center fielder on your defense. I guess he's not, he kind of reminds me of Devin McCourty. If Devin McCourty came out of Rutgers as a safety, a guy who's a great center fielder, great in zone coverage, but can't for the life of him play man-to-man. I guess he's a really good tackler. So, it certainly fills what they needed. They lack a true center fielder, free safety type. He does bring some versatility. Matt and I were talking, I guess, he could certainly be a guy that could come down and play in the slot or the box, whatever you want to call it, a little bit. So he's got some decent size to him. The Swinson thing I like. He really flashed. He only started for 1 season at LSU and had a ton of production. So hopefully he's a guy who can kind of develop, and maybe he just really hasn't tapped into his potential. He's a multi-sport athlete, so that certainly speaks to some versatility and athleticism there. He certainly has the build. He's 6'3", 255-ish in that range. Kind of feels like a guy who, spend a little bit of time developing, have a role on this team this year, and then, hopefully he takes a step and he becomes a legitimate edge rush threat in 2026. But I love those 2 guys. I feel like, Farmer, I don't know as if underrated is the word, but I kind of feel like he flew under the radar with this D tackle class. He did not have a very good 2024 at Florida State, which is not saying much because that entire team did not have a good 2024. And I feel like maybe that overshadowed the fact that I think he's a very, very talented D tackle. I think that he allows them to do a ton of things on that front line of the defense. They don't have like a true guy on the, like a I guess, a traditional D end, a guy that's in the 3-point stance. They don't have a true pass rush guy, so maybe they'll stick with they can rotate guys in out of a 3-4 style defense. But I think that, he allows them to do so much on the D line. You don't really know what you're going to get with Barmore, who missed the entire 2024 season. But I really like what Farmer brings. And I think it allows them to mix up, what they do on that defensive line. It's, you bring in, you've got Barmore, who we know can get after the quarterback pretty well for a guy that plays up the middle. And I think Farmer can certainly do a lot of those things too, and they can rotate guys around. Feels like they got what they were looking for in a safety in Woodson. And then I think both Farmer and Swinson allow them to rotate guys in and out for fresh legs who can really get after the quarterback, and obviously Farmer clogging up the middle and stopping the run.
Yeah, Craig Woodson was a pick that surprised me a lot, just in that once Makuba was off the board, I thought they were going to wait on safety till the 5th or 6th round. And much like Kyle Williams, another guy they targeted, right? Pick 106, early 4th round. They had the whole night before and morning to think about it, and this was the guy they wanted. I do like his versatility. Like you guys both mentioned, the deep safety part, right? They haven't had that guy since Devin McCourty retired. 328 snaps at free safety, but he also had 255 snaps at box safety. He played some slot corner as well. 3rd team All ACC. His 40-yard dash time, 5th among safeties. So this is a really good athlete that can play all over the field. And I wonder if they look at their safety group and they look at Jabril Peppers missed a lot of time last year. He turns 30 this year. There's an out in his contract after this year. Kyle Duggar has an out in his contract after this year. I wonder if they look at Woodson and Marte Mapu and think, hey, that's going to be our safety tandem going forward, or some version of that. Obviously, I know they have Jalen Hawkins, some other guys in there, but I really could see Woodson being a guy that plays in some 3 safety packages as a rookie, but we see a bigger impact in 2026, right? If Duggar or Peppers or both ultimately move on. But that just surprised me a little in that they were that high on him per se. But I think it's a good player and it's a really good athlete as well. Joshua Farmer, there's a lot to like. His 2nd and 3rd step as a defensive tackle, I think, is terrific. 1st step's pretty good. 2nd and 3rd are really good. Good pass rusher. He's just got to get better against the run. Like, I'm not saying he sucks against the run, but he's got to get better against the run because you have Milton Williams, you have Barmore, Keon White can play inside at times. They did that in the second half of last year. You have Jennings, you have Landry, you have all these guys. I think Farmer's got to get a little bit better against the run. That's going to be a big thing I'm watching in training camp, because if he's good against the run, and again, another guy they targeted, traded up for. I think there were 3 defensive tackles that went in the 15 picks after him. So as a guy they targeted, if he gets better against the run, I think you could see him playing, I think, a lot, like not right away, but a lot. And then the other one you guys talked about, Braden Swinson. I mentioned Jared Wilson might be my favorite pick. I think this is the most interesting one because this guy only really played 1 year, 591 snaps last year, which is more than 2022 and 2023 combined for him. And he had 9 sacks per PFF, 43 quarterback hurries. I think he's got pretty good hands, 2nd team All SEC guy. But that being said, sometimes plays a little out of control. He's not really good against the run. Like, could he be a developmental Joshua Uche after a few years, that pass rush specialist that comes in and is pretty good there? Obviously, you would hope for some more consistency than Uche, but can he be a player like that? I think if he's a piece like that on your edge for the next year or two, there's some value there. And if he's more than that, then you could have a real pick. But to me, it's the most interesting one just because the limited playing time. I think he needs a lot more development, but with the edge group they have, I think he's going to have time to develop. So he's a really interesting pick where they took him.
Yeah. Craig Woodson was probably my least favorite pick. Not necessarily that I disliked the player. There was just guys that I wanted ahead of him. Jack Sawyer was still available. Kyle Kennard was still available. Braden Swinson was still available. And if they were going to go safety, I was a big Latham Ransom guy from Ohio State. He's not necessarily the deep ball guy that we want in the safety right now, but I just think he's a damn dog of a player. And the Ohio State connection kind of made me think, Vrabel's going to look at this guy and say, like, this is a guy that will help us win. But Woodson, like you said, he's very versatile. I wouldn't be shocked if they use him inside in the slot defender a little more often than people think. I know we had Andrew Callahan on, and he had brought it up, I think, prior, as well as that they have a desire to get a little bit bigger on the inside, that they don't necessarily hate. You go ahead, John.
No, I think that's a great point because one thing I want to know about Mike Vrabel and Terrell Williams, where do they fall on the philosophical debate between 3 safeties and 3 corners? Because we saw under Belichick, some years they ran 3 corners, like when they had Gilmore and J.C. Jackson and Jason McCourty, right? They ran all that. Then other years, right, when they had Adrian Phillips, especially, they ran a lot of 3 safeties, right? And even if you go back to, the early dynasty years, right, you had, sometimes it'd be 3 safeties with Antoine Harris in 2001, or sometimes it'd be 3 corners with Randall Gay in 2004. Like, so they would go back and forth depending on personnel. And I feel like the Woodson pick, because I think it's going to come down between Marcus Jones and Craig Woodson, because you're going to have Gonzalez and Davis as your 2 outside corners. I think you're going to have Duggar and Peppers as your 2 starting safeties. So do they want Marcus Jones as a 3rd corner, or Woodson / Marpu as a 3rd safety? And they might do both. But I think to your point about them getting bigger, maybe that's a little signal of kind of where they fall on that debate.
Yeah, and it also just leaves the door open for a little bit more of being versatile and moving inside and out of using both of those packages. Where they, again, certain teams, they might be able to play a little smaller in the inside. Maybe they play a team with a couple big slot guys and they want to play a little bit bigger, and that's where a guy like Woodson could come in. I think he is pretty versatile, so we'll see really exactly where he fits in the end. Like, if he's an all-around player that could do a little bit of everything, he's going to find playing time one way or another. With Farmer, I knew the second they traded up. It goes, breaking news, Patriots traded. I was like, all right, here comes Farmer. It was the most obvious connection pre-draft. Everything was connected with him and Farmer. They came in on a visit. They met with him a couple other times. Mike Reese was hollering his name like 3 or 4 times pre-draft. You just knew that connection was there. You guys kind of hit it on the head. He needs to improve in the run game, but there's a level of talent that you like to see there where you could say, okay, he can find a role, help clogging up the middle and coming up the middle for this team. And then Braden Swinson, I think just the value was a really good pick. At this point, like I had edge guys above him that were available at like 106, but they went in between these picks. But Braden Swinson was a clear cut, in my opinion, the best guy available at that pick. And it's just bring him in the doors. He's a little raw. He might need to sit for a little bit, but the talent's there where you say, I think that this guy can be one day a 7 to 8 sack a year type of guy. It may be a scenario where we kind of saw it with the Trey Flowers of the world, a little bit of Wise, like guys in the Patriots defense that don't make that immediate pop and then develop as his 2nd and 3rd year come along and they start to hit their stride and earn a role. So I think that could come in and that could be something that he does. I would like to see them. I think adding another edge rusher, a veteran, is a very possibility too. Right now, I think you probably have Harold Landry on one side, and I mean, depending on what they really want to do, you could have Kean White on the outside, you could have Chase on the outside. They have some versatility and options, but I would maybe like to see them add another edge. Finishing up for the Patriots, they obviously went with kicker with Borregales. Yeah, there you go. From Miami, he was my top-rated kicker on the board. I was a little surprised to see him go around 6. I know Ben doesn't necessarily like the idea of taking kickers. That's why when they went long snapper in round 7, he was a little bit shooken up even more. They obviously went Borregales in round 6, though, at 182, a little bit early, but I do give them props. Baltimore went kicker right after. So they probably saw the writing on the wall there and said, let's get the guy that we like the most. I know Jeremy Springer, the special teams coach, met with him, had dinner with him after his pro day. They went in round 7. Mizzou's offense tackle Marcus Bryant. I didn't know who the hell he was the second his name came up. I'm gonna be
It's a
honest
tackle
with
with long arms. You should be excited,
Yeah.
right? Should they have taken him
Yeah.
at 4th overall? It's a tackle with long arms.
I had never heard of him before the pick, so I'm not going to pretend like I'm some Marcus Bryant expert. The little bit I did looking into him, yeah, he's got some long arms. He's a good size. I'm all for the developmental, take a flyer at that position because who knows, he can sit and maybe learn one and take over one day. And then they moved back from, I think it was like 225. They had 2 picks in the last 7 picks of the draft. At that point, they're really just taking who are the 2 guys that they most want as an undrafted free agent that they want to make sure they get in the door. And that was long snapper Julian Ashby, who Ben was just absolutely losing the idea of drafting a long snapper. And with Mr. Irrelevant, they took Kobe Minor, the defensive back from Memphis. The Patriots social media staff went a certain direction with that pick, made a post that was quickly deleted. We don't need to comment too much on that. What are your thoughts here in I guess, with 2 special teams, the Flyers in round 7, and as we saw, Joe Cardona is already out the door. So Julian Ashby seems to be the front and center leader to take that spot. John, finish us up here, start us off. What are your thoughts on these final 4 picks? Anything you love or dislike?
So there's a lot to like about Borogalis. I think his leg is electric. 18 of 19 on field goals, 62 of 62 on PATs. Obviously, they're closer in college, so it's a little bit easier. Never really played in cold weather, though. The coldest game I could find, November of 2023, played at BC, ironically, and it was like at 42 to 45 degrees most of the game. So never really played in cold weather. That is an adjustment, but I think he's got a great leg. The ball booms off his foot. Good directional kicker as well. And just last point on him, 3rd kicker they've drafted this decade. I really hope it's the last one. Like, don't draft another kicker until 2038, please. Like, just
how about Ryland going to Arizona and just
hitting the game winner? I know.
Here.
I know.
Multiple, like 2 or 3.
3rd one.
Chad Ryland's going to have a statue built in New England if Drake May becomes a Hall of Famer. It's going to go Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, Chad Ryland, Drake May.
Yeah, it'll just show that dinging off the upright in New York. That'll be the statue, right? Look, if it ends up being like Steven Gostkowski, who you drafted in 2006 and became a borderline Hall of Fame kicker for 13 or 14 years, whatever it was, fine. Just, again, I don't want any more kickers. Marcus Bryant, it's funny. Everyone talked about Armand Membu, his teammate, all draft long. 6'7", 320. I think the question asked here, can he develop into a better player than Vidarian Lowe? And if he can do that, and he's your swing reserve tackle, I'm fine with it. He's got to get better at bending.
That's a huge win.
Yeah, John Serenides of the New England Football Journal did a great breakdown on this. Like, he's just got to bend better, which sometimes is tough for a 6'7" guy, but that's something he's got to get better at if he's going to play tackle. But honestly, if he's on the field for you in 2025, something probably went wrong. So this is a developmental pick. When it comes to Julian Ashby, and I know we all love it when they take long snappers, right? It's just a highlight of the draft for us. I spoke to one of his coaches at Vanderbilt about him, and he said that Mike Vrabel and Jeremy Springer went down there 2 weeks before the draft, had a private workout with him. They were really impressed by him. So I felt when he was drafted, you don't draft a long snapper to have 2 on the roster. So I'm not surprised they let Cardona go. I think they wanted a long snapper on a rookie contract, honestly. Cardona's the highest paid long snapper, or was. I think, honestly, this is kind of what this came down to. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm an expert on how he spins the ball. I can just tell you from what his coach told me.
Perfect spin.
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, you drafted the guy. So Vrabel and Springer worked him out and they liked him. So I'll give it that. As far as Kobe Minor, again, if he can develop into a good special teamer and maybe but that's what you're looking for at this point. I mean, it's really in a way
dart throws.
It's like you drafted 3 special teamers in a way, if you include Minor, because like that's really at this point, can a guy develop? And we have seen they've been really good with late round and undrafted corners for like 20 years. But Mike Pellegrino's not here anymore. Bill Belichick's not here anymore. Steve Belichick's not here. Can they continue that trend with some more late round or undrafted corners? It'd be great if they could. It's just something to watch, I guess, with the quote unquote Mr. Irrelevant.
Yep. Matt and I were both, Matt more before me. We both we're on the Andres Borregales train. When we did our final podcast mock pre-draft,
I didn't know he had a train. That's pretty impressive.
yeah, Matt
Fit for a kicker. That's
I
pretty
think
good.
I think Matt was the conductor, and there were like six
I
people
was
in the back. But
a whole six.
I mean, hey, you did get a shout out from Cerrone Battle.
No
on Twitter
different than the orange line. So don't need to worry about it.
Fair. You mentioned the leg. He was, I guess he was hitting from 65 at his pro day. So you love the distance. Accuracy is certainly key. He didn't hit a ton of field goals. I think as far as guys that were draft eligible, he had one of the lower numbers of field goals, either made or attempted. I forget.
I think it was 18 for 19 last
18
year.
of 19.
Yeah.
I think the one missed was like a 56-yarder. He went like 4 for 5 from over 50 yards or something.
I know over the couple of years at Miami, he hit from like 52, 55, 56 a couple times. So like people are a little bit worried, like, does he really have any type of leg? He showed, I saw I think it was a 55-yarder. He hit like midway up the uprights. Like,
yeah.
He's got the leg. We'll see about the cold weather, obviously, but he's got the leg.
Yeah. Again, dart throws. Long snapper might be the least sexiest pick you can make behind an offensive lineman. Matt had brought this up to me, and it kind of got me thinking, I guess. So with Springer at special teams coordinator, he wants the long snapper to be a punt coverage guy, as opposed to part of the last line of defense in punt coverage, that seems to be some of these younger guys, from my understanding from special teams coaches, that tends to be a more of a modern trend. Whereas the old school thought was, well, you just got this guy that spins the ball back, and we need a couple of guys back, just in case it's like, oh my God, this guy broke through. We need a couple of guys to take out a punt returner. So I don't know if it's just moving in a new direction. Want long snapper to be a punt coverage guy. He's clearly got to be super athletic. So hopefully he just kind of fits the scheme. Don't know too much about the other two guys, but again, if they can be developmental pieces that can be, role players in a year or two, that's all you can really hope for out of a 6th or a 7th round pick. If they can become more than that, great. Then you nailed a 6th and 7th round draft pick, and they became something more than just a, rotational role player on your roster. But yeah, I mean, I was happy with Borregales. John, really hope he's the last kicker they take for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
And again, I guess we'll tap into a little bit of Zach saying PTSD. You look back, Chad Ryland was a 4th round pick in 2023. Prior to that, you had, and I don't know the guy's first name,
Justin Rohrwasser,
who was a character and a half. Like, after we started reading about him, I was like, wow, we drafted this guy. He was, I think, a 4th round pick a year or two before Ryland was on the roster.
I think he was 2020. He might have been 5th round, but it was like 4th or 5th round, I think, in 2020.
Yeah, and then they went Ryland in the 4th. But if Borregales can be the guy, great. It's at that point, if they can keep him from being an undrafted free agent and go into a bidding war. I guess there was some talk about Ashby, that there may have been a bidding war for his services as an undrafted free agent. I was kind of like scratch my head, like felt odd that was the guy they wanted, but with his rocky, I guess is a delicate way of putting it, that the special teams has looked over the last couple of years. If he can help bring some stability and change things around for them, then I'm all for it.
Mm-hmm. Zach?
Yeah, so Ben, I had forgotten about Rohrwasser, so my point might have less oomph than it does now. But I mean, with the Borregales pick, if you believe in the guy, go. I have no issue taking him. That being said, John, they both said it. Don't make it a habit to keep getting punters and kickers.
2038. That's the next
draft.
time I want a kicker. 2038 minimum.
All right.
Gostkowski worked out. He was 4th round pick. Ryland's in a way worked out. We got Drake May out of it, and obviously he's doing things for Arizona now. But yeah, Rohrwasser was always me. And then obviously Rohrwasser did not work out. So taking him out though, if you believe in the guy, go get him. Obviously, he did it in college. He has the leg. He has the accuracy. John, you hit the nail on the head with the extra points being a bit closer in college than they are in the NFL. But the long snapper pretty much telegraphed. Everyone could tell it was going to come. That Cordano's days were limited. After that, Ben, I read the same
Surprised
thing
it
that you
takes so
did.
quick.
Are you? I mean, it felt like just kind of get it out of the way. So
I would have thought that they would have prolonged it, maybe did a battle in camp. But I also like the
maybe.
idea that they just cut him now and like maybe he could jump on another team.
Yeah,
Do
I
him a
wonder if
solid
this is
and
just
give
kind
him
of a respect thing to try to see if
Yeah.
he can get another job somewhere else, maybe.
Yeah.
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 And then like I read the same thing Ben you did of Springer wanted to make him more of a punt coverage guy versus like last line of defense. And then again, Minor and blanking on his name, the tackle from Mizzou.
Bryant.
Marcus Bryant.
Yeah, Marcus Bryant. Both of those again, depth pieces. As you mentioned, if he can become Verdarian Low and kind of hone some of the skills that are raw right now, he can certainly be a fine pick. But yeah, I mean, I really had no issue going back to Borregales of him, and then obviously it was very obvious what they were doing with the long snapper pick there too.
Yeah, I mean, I won't jump in and jump on what you guys have said because you talked about it pretty good so far. But the two things I wanted to make comments on was, like you said, like there was going to be a bidding war for the long snapper. That's what I had read immediately after those last 6 picks. It's literally just like, who are your top guys that you like as undrafted free agents? Just take them so no one else can have them. Take them so you don't have to battle and give them guarantees that are anything crazy and stuff like that. And then finally, the long snapping with Ashby coming in, I think there's a secondary factor in that decision with Vrabel was Cardona was the last connection to the Brady era. He was the last teammate on the roster that was teammates with Brady. It's impossible to completely turn over the roster in 1 year, but I think Vrabel made a relatively decent effort to ship out, move on from some certain guys that had heavy influences here from previous regimes. I don't put David Andrews in that regime, in that situation, because I think that was more just like, it's time to move on. But we saw like Bentley get moved out. And now we see Cardona again shipped out the door. He's obviously older and, like you said, making a lot of money. But the way I've kind of get the sense this offseason, I think that Vrabel has had like that little extra effort to say we're starting something new here. And all these older vets that are from the previous era, we kind of want to go in a new direction. So as a whole, I'm pretty happy with this draft. I mean, you guys, what would you grade? I graded it an A. I shifted between like an A and A minus. I put them there were 5 teams I gave A's. It was in the A range. It was the Giants, the Chiefs, the Patriots, and then I gave the Eagles and Bucks A minuses. I absolutely hate how much I like the Chiefs draft. I think top to bottom there was I think like every pick I liked it for the most part.
Them getting
so
Rashard Smith in the 7th round was
like
scary.
it was very infuriating. Look at them, and then the
Yep.
Eagles just continued to do what they do, and it's just take good value players. And like you took, they got Mukaba, and I love that. I wanted him in New England. They got Jahad Campbell at the end of the first, who everyone projected as a mid-first round guy. And so you look at that and compare them. I think the Patriots had one of the best drafts that they've had in a while. Could we 2 years from now be the complete opposite? Most certainly. But for right now, I'm pretty happy. Are you guys in the similar boat as an overall sense?
Yeah, I go A minus. I really didn't have any negatives about it. Only one I didn't really know about was, like I said, Craig Woodson, but didn't feel like much of a reach. John, you hit the nail on the head. It felt like that was a calculated pick, very early in the 4th round, overnight. They wanted him, they got him, and they seemed excited about it. So yeah, there really wasn't anything that I was like, they should have gone here. They reached for some guy here. It was overall solid draft.
For the most part, it's a top 4, like definitely top 3, but I guess top 4-ish rounds where you like do the heavy evals, and their top 4 picks, as much as like they wouldn't have been my picks other than maybe Kyle Williams, like they got some good ball players. I think there's a really good chance that they end up with at least 3 starters from this group. And that would the most likely, in my opinion, would be Campbell, Jared Wilson, and Henderson. I think all 3 of them are pretty likely to have starting roles on this team within the next year, by mid next 2026 season at the latest for all 3 of them. And then you got the wild card like Kyle Williams that, our history is not good, but we'll remain optimistic until it happens. But all right, let's finish this up. Let's do our state your takes. I'm going to keep it draft related. You guys don't have to keep it draft related. Like John, if you remember, anything you want, any take you want. It doesn't even have to be sports related. I'll start us off with draft related though, and it's that Henderson will have 10 total touchdowns in 2025. 10 total. So pass catching, rushing. I think pretty early on he's going to have a very immediate role. And his ability to play all 3 downs, his ability to be a complete player is going to give him a good chance to maybe fend off Gibson in some, third and short situations in the red zone, and it gives him an extra touchdown or 2. So I'll go Henderson with 10 tutties. I hate that I just said that. 10 touchdowns and go ahead, Ben.
Nice. So I'm gonna keep it similarly draft related and say that Kyle Williams is going to be your team wide receiver Triple Crown winner. I think he's going to lead the team in catches, yards, and scores. I think that based on Drake May's skill set, can get the ball out quick, and he's very accurate with the deep ball. I just think that what you see skill set wise that Kyle Williams brings to the table, there's too much to like for me to feel like he can't be the guy. And I'm not saying he's going to be a 80 catch, 1,200 yard, 8 to 12 touchdown kind of guy. But I think that he's a guy.
What was the leading receiving yards last year for the Patriots? Like 600 and something.
I think it was Hunter Henry had like 500 or 600 off the top of my head. I don't remember, but yeah.
He could go like 60 catches for 700 yards and lead the team.
Well, the best receiver season they've had in the last 5 years was Kendrick Bourne in 2021, and he had exactly 800. I mean, really, and I think this decade, that's probably the best quote-unquote receiver season they've had.
I like it, Ben, though. I mean, it's really just how quickly he can gain the trust of McDaniels.
Yeah. So realistically, you could make it one of 2 different guys. So Henry went 66 catches, 674 yards, and 2 scores. Douglas had 66 catches for 621 yards and 3 scores. So, however much you want to value an extra touchdown over 50 some odd less yards, have that debate. Yeah. But, the bar's not super high. Not to say that I don't think Kyle Williams can exceed that. But I think that with his skill set and the fact that Drake May is good at finding guys deep, and with his ability to separate, especially in the short yardage situations, and then just let him take off, I like Kyle Williams to be your leading receiver in 2025.
All right, Zach.
So mine is not draft related. It's more of like just a statement of my thoughts. The numbers rule, and this comes after Matthew Golden announced he's going to wear 22 as a wide receiver. The numbers rule in the NFL has got to change. Sky Moore being 24, Matthew Golden being 22, Terrace Marshall as a wide receiver for the Eagles wearing number 46. Like it's gross. Wide receiver should be 1 through 19 in the 80s. Running backs, same thing. Although running backs, I'll give you a 1 through 9, and then the 20s through 40s. It's gross. Wide receivers have no business wearing the 20s or anything besides 80s, or like I said, low numbers. I hated that they changed it back in 2021 or whatever it was, and already looking like just fools with the 20s and just ugly numbers.
I don't care. Like, it's not something I necessarily care that much about.
It drives me
in an overall sense.
I'm with Zach.
I don't necessarily.
When Le'Veon Bell went to the Ravens, he was 17 and wanted to just throw up. Like, you can't have a running back wearing 17, dude. Come on. Yeah. Can't do it. Won't have it.
When you're like a wide receiver wearing like 46, that's just stupid. But
yeah,
I like it. I respect it.
Might as well wear 72.
Exactly. All right, John. Wrap us out here. Give us something some hot take here.
Well, Zach, actually, Tom Brady agrees with you because when they changed that rule, he came out and said he did not like it and it'd be harder
He
to
hated
ID
it too.
defenses. So
Oh,
you're on
yeah.
the same page with him. Look, I was going to say to you guys that
Thank
I
you.
think the Celtics would have an easier time with the Knicks than they did with the Magic for a state my take, but I'm going to stick to draft related, even though that is a take too. I think we're going to look back on this draft as their best draft of the decade when we go forward. Now, I'm not saying they're going to have a bunch of Hall of Famers here, but I think overall, top to bottom,
Mhm.
I think we're going to look at as their best draft. Now, Drake May hopefully will be their best individual draft pick of the decade. I mean, well, let's hope so. And who knows, Christian Barmore could be the second best one. But I think when you look at Will Campbell, I think he's going to play left tackle. I think Henderson's going to have a big impact. I think Kyle Williams, little boomer bust there, but maybe make some plays. And I think one of those day 3 guys, the non-kicker, non-long snapper, one of the offense defense guys, I think you'll see an impact there. So I think we're going to look back on this, and I know the bar is a little bit low with some of the recent drafts, but I think we'll look back in a few years that this draft is their best one of the decade.
I like it. I like it a lot. I mean, like you said, the bar is not super high for that, but like we talked about this, I've always said that if you can get 2 legitimate rock solid starters out of a draft class, that's like the threshold of what is a solid class for your team. And I said it earlier, I think that they have, I'm confident that they'll get at least 3. So if you could get 3, that's going to be a really good class. And if anything else hit, it turns into a great class. So I love it. I think it's really good. So, all right, that's going to wrap us up here. We hit the exactly 90-minute mark. Any final words, boys? Any love you want to shout out? Any girl you want to shout out? Wives.
I'll tap into the Celtics.
mistresses.
I'll tap into the Celtics real quick, just because John kind of cracked that door open a little bit. We touched on this a little bit a couple weeks ago. They were on the radio earlier today, and I forget who. I think it was Felger and Maz. Were asking, how do you feel about their championship aspirational chances? After mostly the first round has been completed. I would say I feel kind of the same. Miami didn't put much of a fight up against Cleveland, so it's really hard to judge what kind of a roadblock that looks like in the Eastern Conference Finals. I thought the Celtics showed a little bit of maturity in coming back against Orlando last night. I feel like even last year, a couple of years ago, that would have just been a game that they folded in and said, well, screw it, we'll just take care of this in game 6 instead of just, grin and bear it and just battle back. They shut them out. They shut them down in the second half. I don't think that they should have a ton of trouble in the Eastern semis. I actually picked Detroit to win that series, but we'll see. Hopefully they can extend it to game 7. The Celtics certainly could use the rest. But this to me is, it's NBA Finals or bust. And in my opinion, short of, a dogfight like losing it in 7 games, I think they have to win. They got to win the whole thing.
Yeah, we talked about it last week.
Yeah, compared this series to Indiana's last year, where looking back, sweet, but each individual game was a dogfight. Certainly wasn't easy by any stretch. And then this year, same thing. Obviously, they go 5, blew them out last night, but they were losing at halftime. There's been a couple of the games where they just needed to kind of, bear down and dig deep, and they did. To your point, Ben, of not just kind of rolling over and saying get them next time, but actually like closing out at home. So, we'll see what happens, but I agree. It's either NBA Finals or bust for this team going forward.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the only team in the East that can be even anywhere close to as physical as that would be Cleveland, but they're not even as physical as Orlando.
No. Orlando just tried to muck it up, and I think they just tried to be. I think the plan was like just beat these guys up, and maybe we can steal some games, and they get hurt, and maybe because they were hyper aggressive and physical in that series. Nobody else is going to do that to them the rest of the way.
And we talked about it last week, where it's going to be championship or bust for this team. Anything else is a failure. We don't need to go into like the levels of failure, but it is 100% repeat as champions, or it was a failure of a season. So, that's going to do us for this week. John, I appreciate you coming on. You guys can hear him, WEEI, often on in the evenings and afternoons, right?
Most and weekends. Often. Yeah, I'll be on again this weekend on Sunday afternoon. So
Yep. Check them out there. Always a good listen. But until next week, we'll finally be shifting a little bit off the Patriots. We'll have some Red Sox talk, probably some Celtics talk. Maybe we could get into just how god awful listening to Don Sweeney talk in his postseason presser was.
Plenty of thoughts
but
on that.
yeah, I mean, until next week, we appreciate it. We'll raise the banner. Take care.
Have a great night. Thanks again, John.
Thanks, John.